You're listening to Sensitive Changemakers. This podcast is created for highly sensitive leaders and is designed to support you to embrace your strengths and gifts so you can feel more confident in your own mind and body and live a life with intention, purpose, and more importantly, joy. I'm your host, Kate Carter, a fellow HSP who has a BA Honours degree in education, is a fully trained and qualified professional coach and NLP practitioner, and has over 17 years of teaching and over 3 years of coaching experience supporting highly sensitive people. I believe that you can do anything you want to in this life, but that sometimes the path forward becomes muddy with self-doubt and fear of failure. It's my mission to help sensitive thought leaders peel away the self-doubt and stories holding them back, for them to see their own beauty and strength so they can increase self-confidence and self-trust through thought and embodiment work, and see their path clearly and move forward confidently, living their life with intention and purpose. I would love for you to come and join us. Hello, welcome. I hope this episode finds you well. We have had quite a interesting week this week. My daughter last Sunday after playing football, I'm sure if you've listened to this podcast before, you know that my daughter is very active. She loves playing football, drumming, martial arts, swimming. So she's always doing lots of different things. Last Sunday, she came home from football and my husband said she just wasn't herself. I was like, oh, that's a bit strange. Anyway, the afternoon, she was quite warm and I was like, I don't think she's very well. By the Sunday evening, she had quite a temperature and I was like, yeah, she's definitely not very well. Monday, she stayed off with me, so I still got to see my clients, which was fantastic. But I didn't quite do as much work as I normally would because obviously my priority was my daughter. And so I was just giving her lots of hugs. She was highly emotional, bless her. She was really, really quite teary at times. And she just wanted lots of hugs. It kind of broke my heart a little bit. So she was saying that her throat was quite sore. Anyway, I had a look at her throat on Monday and I could just see lots of white spots. I was like, oh, darling, I think you've got tonsillitis. So then it was kind of a mad dash to try and get her some antibiotics. And yeah, that's what our week was like. By the Wednesday, Thursday, she was much, much better and she was going back to school. The temperature had gone. The white spots had started to go because the antibiotics kicked in really quickly. And even though they are still a bit red, a little bit swollen, she is much, much better. So that's kind of how my week's gone this week. It's been a bit crazy, but I'm not gonna lie, I really did enjoy those hugs with her at the start of the week, even though it kind of broke my heart because she was so sad. But I am selfishly making the most of those hugs that I'm getting because I know they are temporary in the way that I've been getting them. I know as she gets older, she's not going to want as many, and so I'm enjoying that time. Anyway, that is not what the episode is about, but I did want to kind of just give you a little snippet into what's been going on for me. As always, I would love to hear what's been going on for you. Please do share. And today I really do want to talk about people pleasing because this is something that is very sneaky and comes up in lots of different ways, in lots of different forms, in lots of different sessions that I have. And as with everything that I share on here, I'm going to give personal experiences because I've been through this myself to protect my clients. But the reason I've wanted to talk about this is because it comes up in lots and lots of sneaky different ways. And part of what I'm going to talk about today is because, and you've heard me talk about the power of identity before, how closely we guard that, how much we hold on to that. And if we truly believe that something is part of our identity, it's who we are, it's really difficult to see the woods for the trees there because it's so closely tied to who we are that we can't see it. Does that make sense? I hope so. So you can't take that zoom out and see things for what they are. You can only see them for how you feel and how you see them through the lens of that identity. And so things become a little bit murky. And I think this is why so many of the people pleasing tendencies come up in sessions because they are so connected to that identity piece. And clients really do struggle to take that step back and see those situations for what they are. So that was the thinking behind today's episode. And everything that I talk about, and again, you would know this from previous episodes, is a scale. So when I'm talking about people pleasing, we're talking about it being on a scale. You might be sort of on the lower end of the scale where you find yourself people pleasing every so often, or you might be on the higher end of the scale where people pleasing is a way of life for you. And so wherever you are on that scale, I want you to just kind of take what you can from this episode and apply it to where you currently are. And hopefully my aim is for you to have some aha moments, for things to kind of click into place, for you to have some action steps that you can take to move forward, however you want to move forward with the knowledge you're going to learn through this episode. So I I truly believe that people pleasing is one aspect, but I think that people pleasing and being highly sensitive go hand in hand. And I think this is because of the nature of being sensitive. We understand what other people are feeling and thinking on a deeper level, and we kind of can empathize with that so much easier. And so we find it's so much easier to fall into those people pleasing tendencies because we know, that person's doing the best they can at that time. They're really struggling at the moment. They've got this going on. Isn't it awful that that's what they're experiencing? And you just want to help them. You just want to provide that support for them. So I think people pleasing and being highly sensitive goes hand in hand, which is one of the reasons I wanted to bring it to this episode. You may find yourself, and I'm going to sort of talk through my experiences, but I want to for you to think about yours as well. Some of the areas that you might find yourself people pleasing is in the form of needing validation from others. That's a big one that comes up in sessions. It's come up for me in my own personal sort of experiences and background. And I'm sure that you can think of examples where, you didn't think you were very good at something or you didn't feel very good until somebody says, well done, great job. And that validation from others. And I remember speaking about this, crikey, back in 2018 because of my teacher background, I can see how society and how education has really kind of cemented that validation from others, grades, giving scores. It's all about waiting for that external validation. And that kind of feeds into that people pleasing, and I just really kind of want to bring that to the forefront because I think that's quite an important aha moment to have when you realize that it's not just you. That's a society. Um, that's society coming into play there, where things are based on how well you do or how much you get in a grade, how many scores you get out of 20 or whatever the score is. The other thing that we can often find ourselves doing is avoiding conflict. Now, this is a huge one for me as a people pleaser, avoiding conflict, not having those difficult discussions or conversations, really just wanting to go, oh no, and hide. So if that's you, I feel you. We're going to talk about that in a bit more detail. And the idea that we don't want to annoy people. We don't want to be a pain. We don't want to, frustrate people, annoy people, make them angry, any of those things. And some of the reasons may be because of your sensitivities. So that's one aspect. And if you think about, if you've just, and I just say just because I'm going to go into a little bit of trauma here as well, but if you are highly sensitive, even just having, and I'm saying just in inverted commas there because it's not just, but even simply being highly sensitive as a child can create a lot of tension. You can be feeling all of these different things. You can be feeling very emotional, and somebody tells you that that's not okay to cry, that you're being really sensitive, that you're being dramatic, or fill in whatever you've been told in your past. And that then makes you feel like, oh, okay, I've learned that this X, Y, and Z, what I was doing is wrong. And so let's stop doing that and try and fit in. So again, that's one aspect of how being highly sensitive can fit into this people pleasing. The other aspect is trauma. And I'm going to, big trauma, little trauma. But if you've had any kind of trauma in your life, then you can have this response of people pleasing. And in the fight, flight, freeze response, it's called fawning. So it's this extra kind of response that not so many people talk about, but it is, I think, so important to acknowledge is that if we do have a traumatic event, whether it's a big trauma or a little trauma, as I said, one of the responses that we can often have is this fawning response. That fawning response is the need to make everybody else happy, to put everybody else at ease, to make people just, make sure everybody else is okay. It's that kind of response. So you've got quite a lot there to unpack anyway. And notice that I'm talking about when you were younger, because those formative years of 0 to 7 to 8 really do. That's when we're creating our identity. That's when we're working out who we are, what the world's about, how we fit into the world. And if we've got these highly sensitivities that are coming in, these traumas, whether big traumas or little traumas, if we've got all of this going on, that's cementing those ideas of who we are and how we fit into the world as well. And then that's when it gets tied to our identity. And that's when it becomes really difficult later in life to kind of peel back those layers and to see things how they are. Hope that makes sense so far. But moving on to, I'm going to give some examples and I'm hoping it kind of makes sense for you. And as always, I'm going to use me as an example, just to kind of protect anybody, any of my clients, because I think that is so important and such a huge part of what I do. I want to make sure that my clients are protected, but I do want to bring in some of the examples so that you can see what I mean. So I'm going to use myself here and you can have a little bit of fun learning a bit more about me. So I am not sharing these for any kind of pity or sympathy. I am just bringing them as examples to highlight my points and to hopefully support you in gaining further clarity so that you can kind of see things in a different light for yourselves as well. So, some of the things that happened in my past that have really cemented that people pleasing tendency for such a long time in my life was I remember being told I walked weird when I was a kid. I bounced apparently. If you were around, and this is going to get lost on so many people, but if you were around in the 80s, 90s, there was an advert called, I think it was for Soft Mints, and it was Mr. Soft, and he kind of just bounced along the pavement. I can remember the advert now. It was a TV advert, and that is what I think of when people tell me that I walk weird. It was like a bounce walk. Obviously, I didn't know that I was doing it because I can't see myself walking, but I remember being told that. I loved acting and singing, and music was such a huge part of my life as a kid. I played so many instruments, and I loved learning music and learning how to read music, learning to play. I even did so created some songs and things like that. It was such a huge part of who I was as a kid. But I was laughed at and I was told that I was rubbish. And I did have a really, really talented friend who she's still my best friend to this day, but a hugely talented friend in music when we were growing up. And I think that had a lot to do with how I saw myself at that time as well. I also remember when I was a bit older, um, I'm, and this is how, again, how I see myself. So this is always through the lens of the way that I see things, which I think is really important to point out here. I always felt that when I was a kid, I always felt a little bit of a misfit. I always felt a little bit strange. I was told quite often that I was a bit weird. And I always I always wanted to kind of be part of a group, but I had really clear boundaries of things that I wouldn't and wouldn't do. So I didn't cave into peer pressure. I had really kind of solid right, wrong values from a very young age. And so I would say no to a lot of things. And I don't know whether at the time of being an early teen, I think I was about 11, 12 at this point. Yeah, I think I was. Whether that really just rubbed people up the wrong way, I'm not sure. But I do remember when I was about, like I said, 11, 12, I remember all of my so-called friends lining up, literally queuing up in front of me while I was sat on a bench. And I still remember it to this day, each of them telling me why they didn't like me and that I wasn't allowed to hang around them anymore. And they just did it one after another. So the next person would come and the next person, and they just left me in the playground all on my own. Luckily, I had a girl who I'd known from primary school came up to me and went, Kate, I've just seen what they've done to you. Do you want to come and sit with us? And I was just in absolute tears, but it was so lovely. So I do remember having that as well. And I remember also, my own experiences of having panic attacks and an anxiety disorder. It felt like at that point there were two versions of me, the logical version of me who knew that I was acting irrationally and illogically, and then the other version of me that couldn't stop the way that I was behaving or stop the panic attacks. And as a result, there was so much guilt around for me because I knew when I was having a better day, I knew how much harder I was making my parents' life. I knew that I was affecting my sisters. I knew that it was affecting my friends and things like that. And so there was so much guilt around that as well. So the reason I'm telling you all these little bits is because when we have these kind of experiences, and those aren't, big, huge things, they're little things that have happened in my life, some of them bigger than others, but my brain holds on to those things because it's part of survival. And what I mean by this is belonging, and actually belonging in a group is a survival response. It's what we want to have. It's our drive as a human being because we know that if we're in groups, we're more likely to survive. So that drive of belonging is huge. And these are all the examples when I was told or felt like I didn't belong. And so that was painful. And our brain will do everything it can to move away from pain. So I've kind of held on to those memories as a way of make sure this never happens again. And my way of doing that is people please. Just make sure everybody else is around you that's happy. Make sure they're happy, because then that will ensure that these things never happen again. So I hope that makes sense. But what my brain doesn't hold on to, and this is what I love working with clients with, is building up the balanced argument, building up what I like to call the alternative evidence. So my brain, if I think about it, I can pull other memories up. I can pull memories of laughs and amazing events and memories that I have of being with really close friends, of giggling until I couldn't stop giggling, or giggling until I felt that I was going to throw up. I can remember winning a most promising musician award when I was, again, I think I was about 11, 12. Um, my husband loves the way that I walk. So there are so many things that I can pull on that really do the balance the argument a little bit, or give alternative evidence for some of the more challenging or not so nice things that happened in my past. But those aren't the things that I hold on to. So one of the things I do really love to talk to clients with is let's build up that alternative evidence bank. How can we really, because whatever we focus on grows. So what can we focus on instead of looking at these? What can we focus on? So that is one thing I love to work in sessions, but I'm going off on a tangent here. So what I want to bring this back to is you've got quite a few things at play here that meant that I was more likely to be a people pleaser. You've got those events that I was talking about where my brain really did remember them as painful experiences, not to be repeated again. Let's make sure we don't have those again. This is what we're going to do to ensure that that never happens again. I've got the highly sensitive aspect of understanding other people, really seeing like this person's not happy or this isn't something they want to hear. And so I became a really good people pleaser to make sure that I belonged and to make sure that I fitted in, and wasn't seen to be weird. So, and that was completely just unchecked. It wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't like, oh, okay, I am going to narrate this out to myself and I never want to feel like that again. So I'm going to make sure everybody's happy. It was so completely unconscious. It was not something I thought about. It was just something that happened. It was automatic based on the experiences that I'd had up to that point. And it's only through awareness and actually highlighting some of the experiences and seeing them for what they are that enables you, like again, to see the woods for the trees, to see those people pleasing tendencies. Now, one of the things that I really want to bring into the episode right now is why is people pleasing such a kind of rabbit hole to go down? I'm not going to say it's bad or negative, but such a rabbit hole to go down. And that is because being kind and being nice are such wonderful, beautiful qualities. But if we think back to the scale of where you are on that on the people pleasing scale, are you somebody that is constantly, are you up the higher end? Are you constantly putting others ahead of yourselves? And if you are, what life satisfaction do you currently have? do you start to resent? Maybe there's one or two people that you're constantly making sure are okay above yourself. And do you find yourself resenting those people? Do you find yourself getting frustrated where you are in life? If any of these things are coming up, that resentment, that frustration, then that's a real clear indication that the people-pleasing tendencies are going so far up that scale that they're stopping you from any life satisfaction, from doing the things that are important to you. And it's when we stop listening to our own needs and wants and desires and prioritizing other people that we really do get to feel that resentment and that frustration. And I don't want any of you to feel that way. So that's kind of why I'm highlighting people pleasing here. And I also think that I wanted to kind of put a different spin on it because I know that I've seen so many, and I'm smiling to myself because I can think of some of them coming up over the years, so many kind of social media posts about, people who don't do this don't belong in my life, or just dump them and move on, they're not for you. And I'm sure you can think of a social media post that you've seen that's really similar. It's quite blunt and to the point, and it's taken no messing, and it's just like people treat you like this, you leave them, they're not worth it. And even though I do appreciate and absolutely respect the message that's coming through there, for people who are like ourselves, really kind of highly sensitive, maybe have had some experiences in our past that's made us really kind of just a little bit self-conscious about how we treat people, how we talk to people. I really do think that we have to find our own way, and being kind of really abrupt just feels like too much of a jump from where we currently are or where we currently see our identity. And again, that identity piece coming in there. So, for example, say a friend is constantly asking you to do something and you say yes every time because you know they're having a hard time at the moment. You appreciate that they're doing everything they can to support themselves and you want to really help them. But every time you say yes, it means that you don't get to go and, I don't know, for example, go to the gym or go look after yourself or go and do some movement or do some exercise. And you're starting to resent that person because you're feeling rubbish in yourself, because you're feeling, just crappy in your own body. Um, if you're getting to that kind of stage, just turning around to them and saying, right, that's it, you're not being my friend anymore. I want to, I've got to prioritize myself. These are the things. I'm hoping you'll see for most of us who are listening to this, that feels like too much of a jump. You still like that person. They might still be somebody you really value. They're just going through a really tough time at the moment. And so going cold turkey just feels like too much of a jump. And so that's why I would really like to kind of talk through things that I've found really supportive and hopefully support you in seeing your own way forward as well. So yes, boundaries are super important, but I think that people who see themselves as kind, understanding, adaptable, going from, like I said, from one extreme to the other is just too much. And so let's look at some small steps that we can do instead that really kind of help us here to bridge that gap. So we're still heading in that direction. We're still making that shift from prioritizing other people to maybe looking at our own needs and our own wants and desires, but we're not doing them in a way where we're going cold turkey. So first of all, the number one thing that I think is super, super important, and actually this can be the lengthiest part, is looking within ourselves, because that's the one thing we can control. We can't control other people, we can't control what they think, what they do, but we can control ourselves and we can look within ourselves and make any kind of adjustments or changes within. And one of the biggest changes that I do love to support other people with, because I know how important it was for me, was to actually look at that inner validation. Instead of looking for external validation from other people and from outside sources, how can we actually, A, like ourselves, and B, validate ourselves? So we're not looking for other people to do that for us. And I think that's a really important first step when we're talking about people pleasing that often gets overlooked, because boundaries seems to be the thing that people put into place. And we'll come to that in a minute, because I do think it's important. But I think the first step is the work that we can do ourselves. And that is looking within. How do we like ourselves? Because I know when I was higher on that scale of people pleasing, the guilt and the want to make sure everybody else was okay. And this would show up like if we were in a social, get my words out, social situation, it would mean me not being able to make a decision, relying on other people to make a decision for me because I didn't want to upset other people, that sort of thing. When I was at that stage, I can honestly say I did not like myself. I got frustrated with myself. I didn't necessarily get frustrated with other people at that time or resent other people, but I did get frustrated with myself and I did resent myself because I didn't want to, I felt very weak. I felt, and obviously this isn't how the reality of it, it was just how I felt at that time. I felt really weak. I felt really pathetic. I wanted a new brain. I wanted a new head. I wanted a different way of thinking. I just wanted to be different. And so I can honestly say that one of the big things that helped me was just doing the work on myself. How can I actually like myself more? And one of the ways that I did this was I looked at some of my values and some of my priorities, and I started to look for the alternative evidence. So my brain at that point, and we all default to negative, but I would say my brain at that point defaulted like 1,000 times to negative, probably to what it should have done. And so I needed to balance the scales. I needed to find evidence in my environment, in my behaviors, in my attitudes that showed me that actually there were some really good things going on. There were some really positive things that were going on. I was a good person. I was somebody who I could like. And so that's what I started to do. I looked for that alternative evidence. And over time that built. It was really a habit that just was like a snowball. I just had a couple of bits to start off with, and then those would build and build and build until I got to a stage where I was like, I feel content. Like I feel I like the person that I am. And to start off with, I always said I like who I am, but I'm not keen on the body that I'm in. And so then it became about, body image and feeling happy within my body. But to start off with, it was building that alternative evidence of what I could see about myself. So it wasn't all, how crap am I? Why can't I think differently? Why is everybody annoyed with me? Why have I got so much guilt, etc.? It was looking for alternative evidence. So that was one way that I did that, and I hope that helps. The other way that I started to do this was just, I mean, I love journaling and just writing things down, especially if you haven't got a coach or a therapist or somebody you can talk this through with. Writing things down can be really helpful because it's just given you that extra distance to see things a little bit differently rather than just thinking them. So getting those thoughts out on paper and seeing them in a different light, just writing them down can really help. So I did a lot of writing down of small wins, things that I was really grateful for that day. And actually, a lot of people don't realize that going smaller is more powerful than going bigger. So the smallest things that I was grateful for that day, the smallest thing that I would declare a win, the smaller the better, because it meant that those felt doable. I could find those every day rather than the big things that were like once every few weeks or once every few months. They felt so much more further away. So the smaller, the better, like really, really tiny things. And I've said this before, but things like, I was just trying to think of some things that came up for me. So as I was getting out of my panic attack stage, just being able to deeply breathe, which I know for people who don't have panic attacks sounds like such a basic thing, but at that time, just being able to like and relax and just deeply breathe. That was one thing that I took as a huge win to start off with. I did that. And then actually, praising myself for being able to do that. You did that, Kate. You could have panicked, but you didn't. You took that extra breath. Well done. And so those tiny, tiny little things that built and snowballed over time. So I hope that kind of helps with that. Um, More recently, so that was kind of about 8, 9 years ago, more recently, things that kind of support me in seeing alternative evidence, because I still have to do this activity because our brains do like to default to negative. are things that I love it when I'm driving anywhere and I mentioned this before, and the traffic lights just turn to green as I'm coming up to the traffic lights. That for me, I always say like a little thank you to whoever's listening. I'm like, thank you, because that's such a small win for me. Um, when I'm downstairs, I've said this before as well, there is a seat in our living room where I just get to see the trees out. There's one tree outside, and I just love watching it sway. And so that's another thing for me, just to kind of just appreciate, and also just to, again, what I love to do is bring it back to I chose to do that. There's that tree. I'm choosing to look at that tree now. This is an action I'm choosing to take. And so really kind of just balancing that scale. So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please do let me know. And once we've got that, once we've built that snowball up, and we are at a stage where we can appreciate ourselves, we like ourselves, we're at a stage there that where we can look at what's important to us. What do we really, big star thinking here, what do we really want from life? In an ideal world, if I could wave a magic wand, what do you want? What do you desire? And then dreaming big, writing those dreams down, and then thinking of the priorities that is going to make those happen. So, what are the things that you need in your life to start moving towards that big goal, that big dream? And thinking about your values and priorities around that. So, what are my priorities? So, to give another example here, when I was first starting my business in 2018, 2019, I was working full time, but it was really important for me to start building my business, start having clients, start marketing, etc. And so I would put evenings and days a week aside to work on my business. And that was a priority for me. And as a result, that meant that if people asked me to do things on those days, the majority of them, unless it was birthdays or a special event, most of them were a no, because I'm focusing on this. And this is where I started to practice boundaries. So when we come on to boundaries, the way that if you're highly sensitive, if you're somebody who's had any kind of little traumas or big traumas in your past, one of the ways to kind of establish some clear boundaries, but in a loving way, is to do it from this perspective, is to look at it from what's important to you, what are your priorities, and then what do you start to need to say no to in order to for you to start working on those priorities and start moving towards those goals. And that's kind of how we can build up that resilience around boundary setting, that resilience around knowing that not everybody's going to like that, that there are going to be people who don't like you because of it. And that's going to be okay. And that's why that work about liking yourself and building up that alternative evidence is such an important part, and why I always focus on doing that before the boundary setting. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And the other thing here that I'm just going to kind of end with, that I hope kind of makes sense for you, is one of the things that always sticks clear into my head. And I think it was my first coach, Kim Arkitsinger, I'm pretty sure, who said this to me. And I'm not sure whether it's hers or whether she got it from somebody else, but I do remember her saying it to me, was if you're saying yes to something or somebody, what does that mean you're going to have to say no to? And that's such a powerful way for me to think about what was important for me. And I'm hoping it's a really powerful way for you to see what's important for you. If you do keep saying yes to other people and to other things, even though you see yourself as really helpful and kind and adaptable and compassionate, which all of those things you still get to be, by the way. But if you're constantly saying yes to people, what does that mean that you have to say no to for yourself? And is that okay for you? Does that feel okay for you? And that sometimes that perspective shift can really enable us to see the boundaries that we do need to put into place, or the things that we do need to start saying no to, so that we can start saying yes to things that are important for us. So I hope that all makes sense. I hope this has been helpful, and I would love to hear your takeaways as always. So please do let me know. Please reach out and just kind of just update me with how you're feeling and how you're doing with this. And I really do think that it's not a tick list. It's not something to tick off your list and go, ta-da, people pleasing, now sorted. I'm never going to have that again. I think with most things, especially if we're highly sensitive, it's a journey. It's something we tiptoe gently through while we're feeling it out, while we're learning more about ourselves, while we're learning more about what we want and our desires. And that in itself can feel really scary at the start. It's just wanting things and desiring things and being okay with that and not seeing it as being selfish. And probably that's another episode in itself. But I'm hoping you can see how it's okay for you to want and desire things, and it's okay for you to feel your way through this and learn more about yourself and what you want and where you want to go. So please do let me know if you've got any takeaways. I will be back next week. I'm sending you so much love. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and I'll see you soon. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you have any takeaways or any questions, please do reach out to me either through Instagram, LinkedIn or Facebook at Kate Carter Coaching, or you can email me at kate@katecarter.co.uk. I always love to hear your feedback and the things that you have taken from the podcast. If you know of any other highly sensitive people, then please do share this so that I can reach more and support more highly sensitive people to embrace their strengths and gifts. As a thank you, I will pick a winner every month for a free 50-minute coaching session with me. Thank you so, so much.